So hello and welcome to the sumptuous and comfortable popcorn counter here at the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I'm Andres Lorente. Very comfortable at the moment, thank you.
It is very comfortable, isn't it? Nice. So this popcorn counter is a sequel to last week's popcorn counter, which was itself a sequel to the previous popcorn counter 4 weeks before that, in what has now become, I would say, a podcast franchise stretching back over many, many episodes of Popcorn Counter podcasts. So for this week, in what we're going to call episode 142 of the Popcorn Counter, I read an interesting thing. So can I read? I love to read you things. Can I read you something?
I like listening to you read me things.
I read something on the internet. So I'm going to read you a list of this year's. This is 2024. This year so far, the top box office pictures for gross take. Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me if and when you spot a pattern. So this year's top box office pictures. Number 1, Inside Out 2.
Inside Out.
Then it's Deadpool and Wolverine.
Ooh.
Despicable Me 4. Dune Part 2.
Ooh.
Godzilla times Kong, The New Empire, which would be Godzilla 53 or something like that. Kung Fu Panda 4.
Ooh.
Venom 3.
Uh-huh.
Beetlejuice, which is, of course, Beetlejuice 2.
Yeah.
Bad Boys: Ride or Die, which I think is Bad Boys 3.
Oh.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is like Planet of the Apes picture number 12, something
missed
like that. I think.
One, yeah.
Twisters, which is obviously Twister.
Hey, we saw that one.
We saw Alien: Romulus.
Hey, we saw that one too.
So that is Alien 7. I don't know. Have you? We are through the top 12 pictures of the year. Have you spotted the pattern yet?
It's a troubling pattern for me because I don't do well with maths, and I'm already trying to add 4 plus 2 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 12 plus 2 plus 7, and I give up. So I think movies have become maths. That's better.
That is a good. Yeah, movies have become. Did you say maths or math?
I'd say maths because we have such a strong UK following. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you. You're catering to me. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would be too confused and wouldn't understand. So this apparently is the first year since anyone started keeping records about box office returns that the whole box office top 10 of the year are sequels. Every
10.
Single one is a sequel. You have to get to number 13 before you get to an original film. First time this has ever happened.
Wow, what's the original film by chance?
So the original film at number 13 is It Ends With Us.
Oh.
Which is the kind of domestic violence picture, which I haven't seen and haven't heard very good things about it.
Okay.
Number 14, also original, which is The Wild Robot. Which I also haven't seen and apparently is better than I hear. Better than I suspected, I mean. Then after that, we're back to sequels again. Then it's A Quiet Place Day 1, which is Quiet Place 3, I think.
Jeez.
Garfield movie, there's been a bunch of them. Gladiator 2.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Joker, Folie à Deux.
Oh.
Folie à Deux, I should say. Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, which is Ghostbusters 5, I think, something like that. And then finally at number 20, we have If, which is another original feature. So out of all 20 of those top 20 movies, there's only 3 original pictures. People are commenting that, well, Wicked is yet to open. That will probably break into that top 10 box office pictures of the year. But Wicked is itself. It's a Wizard of Oz prequel or whatever.
Exactly.
Isn't it? So my question for you is having just talked about Joker, why so conservative?
Oh, I like that. You're not asking me why I'm conservative, though, because
you are one of the least conservative people that I know.
Well, I think conservatives like business and money are what has become of the film industry. I think they want to be safe. I think they're seen more and more as investments and moneymakers. It's a commodity, so it's traded, and I think people want to trade in what has worked in the past. And honestly,
but we've had a film industry for like 120 years or whatever. And people have always loved money. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, the intention has always been to try and make money out of movies.
But the money is so much bigger now. Like if you're going to spend $200 million to make a film, you have to have something that is like proven material and can bring in, if you're not really making any money until what, 400 million, maybe a half million, half billion. Oh my God, $500 million at that point. So I think it's gotten worse. I think for me, just having been on the planet for 55, 56 years now, just walking around, everything seems so much more commodified and so much more, I don't know, conventional, commercial. So I think it's more allegiance to the bottom line than ever before, perhaps. But I think you're right. Obviously people have always made and wanted to make money making films, but I think it's just reached a whole new level, and a lot less risk inclusion, I guess, or risk acceptance. Yeah.
But I guess if people always had that attitude, then nobody would have made Star Wars. And I'm not suggesting that a world in which Star Wars did not exist is not a world I don't want to live. I want to live in. I mean, I would be perfectly happy to live in a world where there is no Star Wars. Wouldn't catch me crying. But those pictures made a lot of money, and someone had to make the first one. Yeah. Somebody had to make an Iron Man film before they could roll it into the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah. Somebody had to make Jaws 1, didn't they? Making original films isn't necessarily a surefire route to bankruptcy. If you're not making any original films at all, what's going to happen to the franchises of next year and the year after and the year after that? Are we destined now to repeat culture eternally? Is that the end of all new ideas?
Yeah. That's a depressing thing on my list, but I put down less creativity. Is that possible? I mean, we're about to embrace artificial intelligence to do a lot of our creative work for us and a lot of our storytelling for us, and I don't see that as being a very good trend. And how could we be getting
understatement of the week there? Yes,
but how could we be? Why would we be becoming less creative? I don't think that doesn't make sense as an explanation to me.
I mean, I wonder whether part of the problem is that the famous decline of the mid-budget movie. So, I mean, last week we watched A Different Man, which is obviously a very inexpensively made film. Yeah. And we seem to have largely lost that, or at least people say that we have largely lost that middle ground between the very cheap indie movies, which are made for a budget of under $1 million, or maybe $1.5 million, something like that. Yeah. And the $200 million mega movies, and that middle ground between the two has sort of disappeared. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that, actually. To tell you, one thing we watched this week, the other night we watched Godzilla -1. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, definitely not.
Which admittedly, it's not a counter argument to the sequel's problem, because it is Godzilla number 26, something like that. But
is that a prequel then?
It is sort of a prequel. Yeah. It's a Godzilla movie which is set kind of during and just after the Second World War. Yeah. And I would summarize it as it's a very good 90-minute film stretched out to 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's there are some great bits in it. There is a little bit too much stuff in between. Yeah. But it's a very visually impressive film. There's lots of kind of big Godzilla effects. And one of the standout things about it is that all these big, mega sort of Hollywood-style effects were done by a really small team. Apparently there were 35 people who did the visual effects, not the sort of the thousands and thousands that we tend to see at the end of Marvel and Star Wars films. So so it looks big and lavish, and it can compete with a Marvel movie, but it was made for about apparently between $10 and $15 million. Wow! So this is a mid to low budget film.
Yeah, that's low.
The film that I saw with my nephew last week, No One Will Save You. Apparently that cost $22 million. Wow! So that's not an inconsiderable amount of money, but it's it's not $200 million. You could have made 10 of those movies for the price of Joker Folie à Deux. Yeah. So there are still mid-budget movies being made. So maybe the rumors of their death are exaggerated. Perhaps that's not. Is that so? That can't necessarily be the reason that we are stuck with sequels.
No. Well, I also think about the platforms too. No one makes a massive film and puts it on Netflix, not straight away anyway. So I think
Well, I'm going to dispute that. Very early on in this podcast, we watched.
Red Notice.
What was it called? Was it Red One?
Yeah, no, Red Notice, I think, was the first one.
Red Notice, that's it. Red Notice.
Yeah.
With Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most abysmal films I've seen during the entire run of the podcast. And that would cost $200 million, and that went straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are doing it.
Yeah.
But, God knows the world of cinema is not richer for it.
I think that was really pandemic related, though, as well. Because people really couldn't go out to because that came out, beginning of 2022 or something like that? So
yeah, something like that.
Theaters were barely open. So, but I would say that, the place for the smaller priced films or smaller budget films is probably streaming more and more. And that if you want to make it money in theaters, you've got to have a huge advertising budget too, which some of the smaller films don't. And I'll extend it by saying that those advertising campaigns are really international now. So I think a lot of the films that are making all that money are really geared for a worldwide audience. I think we used to make films that were far more local or far more national. It used to be, we talk more about foreign films in the old days, but now it's, you can go to Netflix and see series and films in all sorts of different languages. So I think the nature of the industry has changed enough. And I think that with becoming more international, things become sort of, I think, Western or even American conventional. All of those films seem like they're just real American intellectual properties. Very, very widespread appeal. I mean, you don't really need much dialogue in a lot of those films because the story is so visual, or so most of them seem to be action films. So I think that increasingly we're making big films for big returns on an international scale, and I think that means a lot of pre-existing material, a lot of sequels as a result, so it's safe on a worldwide level.
It's recognition. Is this the reason why McDonald's is in every major city around the world? Because
there you go.
Everybody recognizes those yellow arches. So recognition is what drives custom. That's depressing.
I can taste the fries already. I mean, immediately. As soon as you said golden arches, yeah.
But there's a different kind of recognition, isn't there? Because certainly films have been star-driven, and if you were able to get Humphrey Bogart in your movie, it didn't matter that people didn't know, what the intellectual property was, or didn't know who the characters were, because you were going to see Humphrey Bogart. And the same with, people were going to see a Julia Roberts film, whoever she's playing, because you want to go and see Julia Roberts, not because you particularly care who the character is or what their backstory is. And I think do we not still have a largely star-driven industry? I mean, Tom Cruise can open a movie. I'm trying to think who else will confidently open a movie these days. In the same way that you could put Arnold Schwarzenegger in anything and be confident that it would make money. I mean, Will Smith maybe. I don't know. Denzel Washington famously, although I think he's getting close to retirement now, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think Denzel Washington has very rarely made a film that didn't make money.
Well, now you're looking at maybe Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds in the Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds from
Red Notice, famously from Red Notice. One of the first films we reviewed. The first film we reviewed, I think. Do we count Dune anymore? I forget which one came first.
I don't think we do. Speaking of Dune, do you think Timothée Chalamet is going to be the guy who will open pictures now? Has he got the star power?
I think Timothée Chalamet should make smaller films. I really do. I think that would be better. It would be better for the film industry. It'd probably be better for him too. I don't. Like the Dune stuff did not capture me at all. I wasn't riveted to the screen. In fact, I didn't see the second one. I didn't even know there was going to be a second one when we reviewed the first one. I think Red Notice came first. I think we did Dune as our second week. So, I think they're definitely big actors. They still need them. But, George Clooney and Brad Pitt just made something that went right to, probably, I think it was Netflix. Wolves, maybe?
Yeah, I think it might be Apple TV. I think it might have gone straight to Apple. And Apple have already announced that they're not going to greenlight a sequel because it's so bad. Yeah, so I think, people like Schwarzenegger used to be so international, right? That was like the name. The Rock briefly there, I think.
But yeah, I mean, that's very often that's the reason you hire an actor is because you need that opening weekend. You have to open the film, and I just think that those are such conventional ways of looking at the industry and success. For me, it's just I feel like so much money is just wasted. If you wasted less money, then you could take more risks, and we'd have more interesting films as opposed to less and less original material.
There's got to be some kind of accounting shenanigans going on, I think. When we watched Joker Folie à Deux, and that film cost supposedly between 160 and 200 million dollars.
Yeah.
And we were asking, but how?
Yeah, where?
How did they spend all that money? And I think basically there has got to be some big fees eating up an enormous proportion of that massive budget.
Graft, man.
So your money isn't necessarily buying more talent.
No.
It's not necessarily buying more creativity or better set pieces, or it may just be that the people who are making the films want to make the films that they know they can swallow up an enormous fee for.
Yeah.
So surprise, surprise. What is the enemy? The enemy is wealth inequality. That's that seems to be the enemy of most good things in the modern world. And that may be one of the drivers which is keeping us from having good films.
Hear, hear. Well said. Yeah, it's just sort of this monster that just keeps feeding itself and leaving little droplets, little droppings, and that would be feces, little pieces of feces for us after ingesting lots and lots of cash. It's a cash-eating, pooping monster.
There is one other wild card in the deck, which you alluded to earlier, which is AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been suffering from what I hear is apparently called AI vertigo, which is just the disorientating dizziness that you experience when faced with the speed of progress that AI is making. So I had a look. I looked it up. We did do a popcorn counter about AI about 18 months ago.
Yes. Remember.
When ChatGPT was still a bit of a novelty.
That's the Helicopter Tiger pod.
It is. I wrote a script with ChatGPT called Heli Tiger, and the script was truly awful, but it was correctly formatted, and it was probably no worse than some films that we have seen made. It was no worse than Red Notice. Absolutely. And at the time we kind of laughed and sniggered and said, well, I wonder what would become of this. And what's become of it is that it's just got better and better, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But at the time, AI image generation would give you a sort of a strange, distorted, dreamlike, sort of nightmarish semi-picture of the thing that you asked for.
Yep.
And now, 18 months later, AI image generation will basically give you what looks like a perfectly believable photograph of anything you ask it for.
Yeah.
Was it about 9 months ago? Did you see that that photograph of the Pope wearing a puffer jacket, which circulated widely? And a lot of people were convinced that this was a real picture of the actual Pope wearing an actual puffer jacket, and it was only later it turned out no, this is an AI generated image. That sort of thing is utterly commonplace now. To the extent that almost any image that you see published or online, you have to ask yourself, is that real? Is that AI generated? AI generated video is now racing ahead.
Yeah.
I see kind of AI generated pop videos on YouTube. I reckon we are only months away from AI generated short films that are actually probably perfectly watchable. They probably won't be generated by AI exclusively from start to finish. They will be made of many AI generated clips that have been edited together by a human.
Yeah.
But they will still be using original footage that has been made entirely inside the computer rather than using a camera. I think I think we're very, very close to that.
Probably, yeah.
And inevitably, it will mean then that we will have a tidal wave of dross washing over us. And probably dross that will appeal to the very basest human instincts, meaning that it will all be basically boobs and rockets and explosions, and somebody who looks a little bit like Tom Cruise in a superhero costume.
Yeah.
But But I'm not going to say that Tom Cruise appeals to the basest instincts, because I quite like Tom Cruise as well. But I'm going to be optimistic. I reckon that there may also be some AI-generated short films that are actually, it might be good.
Yeah.
They might be meaningful. There might be something novel and interesting and intellectually challenging and stimulating and genuinely new that will come out of AI-generated short films. But I tell you what, they will be cheap.
Yeah, very.
These will be short films that will be generated without paying actors and camera operators. You won't need a rigger. You won't need grips. It will just be a bloke with a graphics card.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say that, new AI-generated, cheaply made films will be the savior of the industry, because that seems, utterly unlikely.
No.
But it might lead to something new. Something interesting. What it might lead to is a bit of risk, is what I'm trying to get at. Because that is what I think we are truly lacking, a bit of risk. Just some experiments, the freedom to try something that's new, rather than iterate on Kung Fu Panda again.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because obviously all this AI-generated stuff is literally taking previous human-generated work and turning it into a kind of weighted average, but maybe something special can emerge from that. Maybe. I hope. I don't know. Do you think?
I do, but I think one problem is that a lot of stuff that's really first drafts is passing as final products these days.
Oh,
so yes. I think for me, I kind of embrace the AI in the sense that I would love to see one of my scripts. I'd love to pump one of my scripts into AI and see a version of it. I think that'd be awesome. It might be the only way I ever get a film made, honestly. But I wouldn't call that the final product. I would use it as a draft, what works, what doesn't work, and now rewrite it as necessary, and then go off and shoot it and make a good film. I don't think that's the way it'll be used, because I know humanity. I know that we weren't ready for the internet 35 years ago or whatnot, and look what a mess we've made of that. And I don't think we're in any way ready for AI. I think it's going to be an absolute cluster fudge. And but I do see how it could be useful if you're using the technology to sort of get an earlier draft of things. If it's part of the creativity process, yes. If it's the source of the creativity, I think that's a mistake, and I think it's going to end up looking pretty ugly. But I do see that it has value for those of us who don't have $100 million to make a film, to at least get a look at what we envision and see if it works. But I think a lot of people use that as, okay, here's my film. This is the final draft. It's done. And I think we're going to see more dross in that tidal wave you were alluding to before. The last comment I would make is, it's just about how insular the industry already is. And I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing a narrower and narrower variety of options in the theaters. I think, the people who have the money to make films are the ones who are calling the shots. And it's a fairly small group of people, and it's again, it's consistent with the way the world is going. We're definitely seeing oligarchy here now, and you're seeing that the people who are in power are the ones who get to choose who their presidents are and what policies we follow. So I think the film industry is just another indication of that. I think it's a fairly small community. It's still, when you think about it, it's still really focused in basically Los Angeles and a couple other cities around the world, and so there's not a lot of diversity of thought, and I think that's consistent with the lack of diversity in offerings that we see in the theaters.
I mean, you are right. I think that my understanding is that the smart money is on more consolidation over the coming few years, that more studios will buy each other, more power will be concentrated in the hands of fewer people. Yeah. But it reminds me a little bit of that moment when 1970s rock was dying out and punk was surging up to take its place. Yeah. In the same way that when handheld video cameras became cheap enough that teenagers could film each other skateboarding using them. And then suddenly we had Spike Jonze, or we had Michel Gondry, or we had this was a medium for new talent to rise to the top. Yeah. And there was an awful lot of dross, and there were some terrible skateboarding videos, but also this was a route for something new and fresh and interesting to come up. In the same way that cheaply made guitars that you bought in Woolworths might not appear on a Led Zeppelin album, but you could record a punk tune with it, and something rising up from the grassroots was what altered the industry. I wonder whether there can be a kind of a folk film industry, a kind of a grassroots cinematic culture, which leverages, that sounds very American, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
AI in the pursuit of something genuinely interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being way too optimistic here. I'm sure your rather more world-weary and realistic view is probably more accurate. We're probably all screwed, aren't we? It's going to be a clusterfudge.
Short term, yeah. We need to get to that point of absolute excess as soon as possible so that the resourceful ones, the creative ones, are able to rise up. And I think you see that everywhere. Like, I mean, for example, this country had no decent beer, 30 years ago. And then we started getting the craft breweries. And now, I can go around my neighborhood. There are about 20 different places that craft their own beer, and I can go there and drink something in a smaller environment. And I think I've always thought that cinema really needs that to go a bit more local, smaller movie houses showing more interesting stuff. And there's no reason why we can't create tons of content. In fact, I think it's a great industry in the future. It's not it's not an extractive industry that's going to cost us lots of natural resources. It's not a polluting industry other than it's got ancillary pollution, I suppose. But creative outlets are great for our economy. And if you're paying people smaller dollars for smaller films, I think it's the model that works. And ironically, it's the model that conservatives and business people always talk about. Small business. They don't practice it, though. You're exactly right. Everyone's merging and becoming these huge organizations. And we, in our lifetimes, we're going to have to endure a lot of that crap before, I hope by the time I die, that there are lots more smaller industries, and the film industry would be a much welcome de-escalation, let's call it.
Oh, that's nice. De-escalation. I like that. Well, how about this then? What if AI, not this year, not next year, probably not the year after that, but before you and I die, as you've so elegantly put it, is able to provide the craft brewery equivalent, not of exhibition with small movie theatres, so much as the craft brewery version of a studio. What if you were able to make small local films?
Yep.
Which cater to a micro audience, but which don't have to look shaky and crummy.
Yeah.
What if you could have a beautiful, sumptuous film about a very, very narrow niche interest or a very local enthusiasm, which could just play to a small local audience for whom it has a great deal of meaning. Yeah. Maybe this kind of folkification, that's not a word. I've just made that up.
Totally a word. I'm checking the dictionary right now. I'm going from page to page. I just found it in an old dictionary, folkification.
Then maybe there is a future for the film industry as a kind of craft brewery analog. We could enjoy a craft movie.
Yeah. Oh my God.
With a small audience and a niche theme.
We've got to be careful about putting our grayed out ideas out there. I mean, as a top 25 podcast, there are a lot of listeners who are stealing our ideas, but that's unity, man. Let's do it together. Listeners,
we'll do it together.
Let's do it together. Right. This is, I've always thought this is the future, and I would really love to start working on this. And obviously you need some seed money, but you more need the teams of people who really work that way and kick into it, put some money into it, make your own films. But again, there's probably a space, as you just said, for AI in that, because it helps the little guy, or could. We don't know how we're going to be paying for these services. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it could be used to make things smaller and make things better.
Maybe there is a future without sequels of sequels of sequels.
Oh, please. I feel like I've seen this movie before. I haven't even walked into the theater yet, and I think I've seen this movie.
Well, it can only start after we finish the popcorn, though.
We'll probably have artificial intelligence popcorn here soon.
Yes, it will automatically calculate your ideal flavour and serve up, butter, I suppose, probably.
Butter. Just more butter.